I would like to thank you all for coming to Bled. Your knowledge, experience, and energy are highly valuable and indispensable for the success of the forum. I wish you many creative and open discussions, plenty of innovative thinking, and a most enjoyable stay here in Slovenia. My time is up, and it's my pleasure to introduce and pass the floor to Dr. Nick Gowing, international broadcaster and visiting professor, and ask him to take over with the leaders panel entitled New Global Order. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator, Dr. Nick Gowing, and let the 2015 Bled Strategic Forum begin. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and it's my third time here. I'm delighted to be here, and even more remarkable, as the mayor said, is the weather and the sights. And in so many ways, it's incongruous given what we're about to discuss over the next hour and 3/4. As the Prime Minister said, it's the most complex and most volatile time in recent decades, and that really is going to underpin the discussion that we're going to have on this platform. But it's not just going to be a discussion, it's going to be a conversation, because I would like you to be involved in this right from the get-go. There are plenty of you who would like to contribute, I'm sure. And I wonder if we could have a little more light in the room so that I can see who we're talking to. Thank you very much indeed. The guests will come on. There's one important thing I'm going to show you now, which is the address. I'd like you to use your smartphones and your tablets to communicate. That's why I'm standing here alongside a laptop, because actually you can help create the agenda for this discussion, which will go on until just after 5:30. There in the top left-hand corner, whether you're in this room or you're watching on television, there it is. There's the address. It'll be up there throughout the next hour and 3/4. And I want you to help set the agenda after we've heard some opening remarks from Donald Tusk. And that's important because there are probably things on your mind which may not even be on the minds of the politicians who are going to be on the panel shortly. 7 of them. It is a 75-minute conversation. Don't hold back until the last moment. I'd like you to get those ideas onto the agenda as soon as possible, and then we can work out the kind of areas that you would like to talk about. We've heard about the challenges of migration. We're seeing what's happening in Ukraine, and there's been a terrible incident in Kiev in the last few hours involving policemen outside the parliament. These issues are not going away. They're unthinkables a year ago. Now they're happening. What else is on the radar? Where is the horizon scanning? What are the dilemmas? How much cooperation can there be in line with the 70th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, the formation of the United Nations, 40 years of the Helsinki Act, and of course 20 years since the big agreement in the Balkans as well. These are troubling times, and all of you know exactly what is going on, but there are so many unthinkables potentially around the corner. As the orchestra has now moved away and taken all their instruments and microphones with them, we can now move on directly, therefore, with the panelists who I'm going to invite up the highest level possible. Let me invite onto the platform the personal representative of the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Christian Fries. Welcome up. Please come and join me up on the platform. He's Executive Secretary for the UN Economic Commission for Europe, based in Geneva. Welcome. Secondly, Lamberto Zanier. You are here. I hadn't seen you before. That's good. I wondered if you might be on the phone. Nice to see you, Lamberto. Secretary General of the OSCE, which has been facing so many challenges, especially in Ukraine. Thirdly, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia, Mr. Aleksandar Vučić. And of course, the baton within the European Union is currently being held by Luxembourg. I'm joined on the platform, hopefully, by Monsieur Xavier Bettel, who is the Prime Minister of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. Then we welcome Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council. Welcome. We're going to hear remarks from the President shortly. then to Croatia and Ms. Kolinda Grabar-Kitarovic, who is the President of the Republic of Croatia. And finally, our host, Borut Pahor, who is the President of the Republic of Slovenia. Now, I've got to tell you, and I've said this to them beforehand, don't worry, there aren't going to be 7 speeches now. This is about discussion and conversation, and as I said to you already, and I've got several remarks already on my laptop here, this is about you helping to set the agenda. But these are difficult times, and let's ask Donald Tusk, first of all, the President of the European Council, to give the only opening remarks. You can either do it from where you are or do it over at the lectern. And please keep the ideas coming through on those addresses.
Yeah. Thank you for the light, and thank you for your coming, ladies and gentlemen. I've recently read an article by Ivan Krastev, which reminded me of a book I came across more than 30 years ago, written by Raymond Aron and entitled In Defense of Decadent Europe. As a then editor of an illegal periodical, it was the time of the communist regime in Poland, I was looking for inspiration, something that would help me go beyond the simple division, the political power versus the underground opposition. The reflections of freedom of authors such as Raymond Aron, Michael Nowak, Friedrich Hayek, Karl Popper, or Isaiah Berlin formed a foundation for my personal and political optimism, mixed with cautious skepticism. Today, I feel duty-bound to undertake an effort, both intellectual and political, to once again defend the decadent Europe along with her old-fashioned values, above all, freedom and democratic capitalism. By a fortunate coincidence, I am saying these words on the 35th anniversary of the birth of the Solidarity movement, which was also my experience, maybe the most important in my life. When Aron was writing his Defense of Europe in the mid-1970s, the prevailing mood was one of pessimism and doubts about the future of democracy and free market, as well as about Europe itself. Religious violence ran riot with geopolitical consequences. Nationalists rose on the left and right. The energy crisis shook the European economy, discrediting mainstream politics. Terrorist groups emerged, particularly aggressive in Italy and Germany, while the student revolts and radical movements, often backed by Soviet secret services, shattered societies from within. Europe was losing clout on the world stage, and many thought that they had found themselves at the crossroads of blind alleys, as Ivan Krastev so aptly described. The voice of Raymond Aron, barely audible in the 70s and drowned out by the avant-garde outcry of radical intellectuals, proved to be the voice of reason and shrewdness. Europe and her traditional values, which constitute liberal democracy, have not only survived, but have also become once again a universal positive model for millions of people, not only Europeans. There exists a good number of reasons also to defend today's decadent Europe. To every sensible observer of the global scene, Europe is still clearly the best place on earth. In fact, migrants who put their lives at risk to find their way across to our continent know it better than anybody else, unintentionally becoming the most obvious proponents and advocates of the decadent Europe. One can't help but notice the stark contrast to some of today's European intellectuals who are always outraged, ready to offer scathing criticism of their own community and at the same time being completely unable to find practical solutions. By the way, in the past, the main task of intellectual was to think, while today it is to be outraged. I hope you know what I mean. They are too busy looking for an ideal, ready to abandon reality for destructive projects which look and sound creative and attractive. But the last thing Europe needs today is new theories and grand visions. In fact, what we really need today is sound judgment, determination in action, and common sense. For sure, the European Union is not the best of all possible worlds, but surely it is the best of the existing ones, and in all likelihood the best among those that humankind has seen across the centuries. Europe is relatively safe and prosperous and shows respect for the rule of law and the rights of individuals. The poor are offered help. Universal education and medical care are provided for. We are not perfect, but are still doing better than at any other time or anywhere else. Europe has also found a way how to durably substitute conflict and violence for dialogue and consensus. Isn't this enough to defend her? I often hear that what Europe lacks today is energy, vitality, and bravery. We are surrounded by nations and civilizations powered by the energy that they draw from nationalism, religious orthodoxies, and ideologies. It is often poverty that lies at the source of this energy, which was also our experience in Europe's remote past. Today, however, the attractiveness of Europe stems partly from the fact that our continent is largely free from these potent and dangerous emotions. Europe is secular, multinational, tolerant, wealthy, and pluralistic. In a sense, she was conceived and designed as an alternative to the 20th century's hell of nationalism and totalitarian ideologies. Surely no one in their right mind would want us to return to those sources of energy. In fact, the question if anybody would like to go back in time is irrelevant. It is simply impossible if you want to continue to think about Europe as a political entity, about Europe as a whole. No European nationalism, just like no one European nation will emerge. It is also unlikely for one religion or ideology to conquer the hearts and minds of most Europeans. This is why our energy and determination must be powered by other emotions. One such emotion is pride. Today we need to feel more proud about our common Europe, simply because Europe deserves it. Pride about our culture, wealth, and the political idea of solidarity. I have in mind the same kind of pride which the ancient Greeks felt for themselves and for the barbarians. Not because the barbarians were worse, but because the Greeks lived differently. Pride is this galvanizing value which breeds the feeling of dignity and the need to fight for it. Incidentally, we Europeans must today restore the ability to distinguish between pride and hubris. All too often we show hubris to our neighbors and weakness to the stronger, forgetting that hubris is accompanied by weakness, while pride is accompanied by strength. In the history of politics, an arrogant weakling has been a most pathetic figure. We need to think about our Europe with greater tenderness and patience. We need to protect her not only against external threats when they appear, but also against internal temptations for revolutionary and total changes. The European Union certainly needs to adjust and improve itself, and it must do so constantly, but under no condition should we undermine the very essence of Europe or the political and legal norms of the Union. There is more and more talk about the need for the new legitimacy of the European Union as the historical reasons for its creation, the reaction to the tragedy of the Second World War and to the threat from the side of the Soviet Union, will no longer suffice. New generations will look for new justifications, but what will most certainly endure will be the positive legitimacy of who we are today and who we want to be in the future. And I have no doubt that we want to remain free, tolerant, wealthy, and safe citizens of the national states organized in one European community. If we stay true to our values, we will win our future. To achieve this, we need to be strong and smart, the most priceless assets in politics. Instead of concentrating on predictions about the distant future and long-term planning, we need to stay in shape. As the saying goes, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. More important than ambitious visions are therefore our prowess, resilience, courage, and determination. If we are able to rebuild them, we won't be afraid of the new challenges, even if they take us by surprise. Pragmatic European leadership, both on the level of national states and pan-European institutions, must focus on practical solutions. Problems that we encounter presently can be overcome on condition that they do not become an excuse to turn Europe upside down. Equally important are mutual loyalty and solidarity among European players, in particular vis-à-vis external enemies. I don't suppose anybody has any doubts that they exist. On every issue on today's agenda, the Greek crisis, war in Ukraine, migration, terrorism, potential Brexit, we take action which, if only we are sufficiently loyal to one another and stand united, will bring about positive results. We will continue to live with the problems longer than we would like to, but this is not the reason to question our European principles. Is global disorder the new global order? No. In fact, disorder has existed since the beginning of time. And indeed, the moderator of our session, Mr. Nick Gowing, who in his very long and amazing career as an international broadcaster covered such dramatic events as the terrorist attack on Twin Towers, the Gulf War, Kosovo, Mumbai, the death of Lady Diana, the financial meltdown, and the imposition of the martial law in Poland, which is especially important to me, is living proof that disorder and chaos are an immanent part of our human existence. Perfect order has always been a dream, while the world around us has always been full of conflicts and surprises. The real challenge is not to change the status quo in search of the perfect order. It is beyond human reach. Therefore, the real challenge is to preserve and consolidate our imperfect order, which we have enjoyed within the European community. Thank you very much.
Mr. Tusk, thank you very much indeed. What I'd like to do is drive the conversation, picking up some of the points that you've been making, and invite everyone to come in on this. But I think, and I'm already getting a couple of messages here of concern, that actually, while there are these great ambitions and the kind of language you've used, tenderness and patience for Europe, we must be strong and smart. Actually, there's a fear that really events, despite the fact of what you've just said about there's always been this disorder and so on, that actually what we're seeing is the limits now of organizations and partnerships. Are you feeling that where you work at the moment, the limitations?
No, I don't think so.
You need to press the red button,
sorry,
please.
I don't think so that the limitation, this is today our main problem, because we have to use our imagination, because, if we agree with you that limitations are something objective, then we have no chance to solve our problems. I am absolutely sure that, for example, the situation with migration and also the situation in Ukraine is something new for Europe. And for sure, Europe is much more complex organism, political organism than other powers in the world, like the United States or Russia or India or China. And this is why I always try to underline how important is to be more patient as a European, because we need a little bit complex method and solutions than our partners. But this is because, for example, towards migration problem, because we want to be, as before, tolerant and effective, open and sufficient. It's today we can see this space between, for example, Hungarian initiative. I mean, this wall, this fence on the border between Hungary and Serbia. And for example, on the other side, this mess, this helplessness in Calais or in Italy or in France in train station, when we can see the thousands of migrants. But for sure, for Europe, the most important thing today is to find the way between. It's not easy. Maybe I'm quite sure that we will need more than 2 weeks or maybe 2 months. Maybe we will need 2 years. But there's not the reason to give up. We are not here to give up.
I don't think anyone's suggesting you're giving up, but let me just quote to you Amelia Pasquier, for example. Decadent Europe, how much more decadence is needed before Europe acts? This problem of the realpolitik which you have to deal with and public perceptions. Let me go to the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. You've got that baton at the moment, Mr. Patel. What are you discovering about after all, you're having to move very swiftly and engineer some kind of forward movement on the very pressing migration problem as winter begins to approach. What are you experiencing of the ability to cooperate and have partnerships, given that every country on migration has its own national challenges at the moment?
It's a large question where you would need... You asked me in 2 minutes to give you an answer to the most dramatic situations that we have now in Europe, so it's a bit short. First thing is we have to see the reasons. We see that we were more active internationally to try to take away Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi than to react now on an international basis to find solutions for government in Libya, Iraq, and to see if we should do something in Syria or not. So sometimes I'm a bit surprised about reactions, because the immigration question is a reaction of the situation in those countries. We should do the difference also between migrants and people who want to save their life. Because nowadays in Europe, we put everything together. We have the economic migrants and we have the political refugees. I have demands in my country from neighbor countries from here. They want to be, they are candidates for the EU, and on the other side, I have demands from citizens from their country to have political asylum in my country. So for me, it's important that we agree also in the EU about this safe state list, so that we have fast procedures also on those things. Because people, they don't understand. They see everything together, and they don't make the difference between the refugees and the economic demands. What happens and what is terrible, it's when 1,000 people die in the Mediterranean Sea, everybody says we have to do something. When they leave the church on Sunday, they say we have to do something. But when they come back from Brussels and they have to go back to their own country and in front of Parliament and in front of the press, they say, yes, but we have to see, because they feel that the pressure from national people are a bit more sensitive. And they want to have to be on this situation where they want to be solidary, but they know also that there is an acceptance in their own country. But we should never forget in Europe that we were also a poor continent. And that if we are what we are today, it's because of solidarity. So I would be happy if some of my colleagues around the table would not have what I call Sunday speeches when they are in front of the people who wants to hear solidarity, but then take another speech when they are in front of the press in their own country because they are scared about populism. But we see it. We see it in the last elections, that we have to take it serious, that people are a bit scared, and so we have to explain to them what are the situations, why the people left their country. Because I don't want afterwards that in the 28 countries we have extreme right parties on the power. So it's important to inform them, to also explain to them that it's a chance for Europe. It's also a chance for Europe to have an immigration, but really I would like to solidarity, it's not for 1 or 2 or 3 countries. Also,
well, let's drill down on that. There are other comments coming through on migration because with Croatia, with Slovenia, and also Serbia, all of you are affected by this in your own ways. Let me come to you from Serbia. What do you think, Prime Minister, about the challenge and how Europe has been responding? I mean, in the end, this has hit you in the face at very high speed in ways which you weren't expecting.
I don't see that Croatia and Slovenia are actually facing this problem, to be very honest.
A microphone.
Yeah, I did it.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
It's on, but maybe
tall,
someone can
probably,
switch it up.
I'll do it. This is better. Yeah. I think that actually Croatia and Slovenia are not facing that problem at this particular stage. There are a few countries that are facing huge problems, and it's that route from Greece to Macedonia, then to Serbia, and then we face defenses, barbed wire, and walls. And we are the first country actually that does register those guys. They are not registered in Greece, which is EU country. Sorry to say that to all of you, even to you, Mr. Tusk. And they are coming from Greece to Macedonia. They just let them go to Serbian border. Then we have to accept them. We organize reception center for them. We do medical treatments for those people. We do whatever we can to feed them. And then on their route, they pay their tickets to come to Belgrade. Then once again, we accept them, and we're going to build another reception center in the vicinity.
But what I'm trying to get at is how a government like yours copes with something which you weren't even thinking about 3 to 6 months ago.
We are not in the habit of crying, and there is, yeah, I'm very honest when I'm saying that, because all the other EU countries would do that all day long. But you know, there is something. We don't belong to EU, although our strategic goal is to be a part of EU and to be on that and to stay very firmly on that path. And I appreciate and I agree with most of the things that Donald was saying here. But there is one important question: how did it happen that Serbia didn't erect any walls, any fences, any barbed wires on its border with Macedonia, which would be very easy for us? It might even boost our economy. But some EU countries did it, and you were silent. All the Europeans were silent about it. They expected to see some good results from building and erecting these fences and walls. After they noticed that there were no results, well, now we need to find some other solutions. What we need from EU regarding migrant crisis, it's only one thing. It's a comprehensive solution on that issue, and we are ready to take our share of responsibility, which means if you make some quotas, we'll take, although we are not EU country, we cannot afford ourselves something that, let's say, Germany or some other countries can afford to itself, but we'll take some people even to our country.
But let me just press you and all of you. Are you seeing partnerships emerging from this? In other words, a very serious issue which is challenging so many countries.
Let me define it.
Is every country standing for its own interests, or is there partnership emerging?
We are all very selfish, and I hope that EU in particular will get together, will come out with a comprehensive solution, and all of us will join to that. But we have been waiting for that for almost 6 months. And I hope, after I heard Angela Merkel and Sebastian Kurz, and after I heard Donald Tusk here, that they'll come out very soon with that solution, and we'll deliver on that. And that's it. But we needed a lot of time to act on that. And let me remind you on that energy stability crisis. So far, Serbia is the most jeopardized country. And so far, I haven't seen a single cubic meter of that promised gas from the other sides. Sorry to say that to all of you. We have been discussing Syrian issue. We have been discussing Ukrainian issue. Is there any of those problems that's been resolved? very recently, or I didn't hear.
All right, so you're very negative on the issue of partnerships.
No, I'm very positive on that.
On the principle,
That's the reason why I was
reality.
reacting. And all the others were allegedly for that partnership, and they were doing nothing on that. We were more European than some Europeans on that migrant issue. We were more Europeans than some Europeans on some other issues. And that's what we need in the future. Real partnership, not alleged partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do please give me your comments, if you can, from your tablet or smartphone. President Katarovic, what's your view from Croatia?
Yes, well, first of all, I do appreciate Serbia's position and the situation that you are in right now as far as migrants are concerned, but I beg to disagree with the fact that Croatia and Slovenia are not affected. Yes, we are very much so, because this is all about solidarity and burden sharing about the more than 200,000 migrants that we're talking about right now. We have taken a number of refugees who have come to Croatia. The government has committed recently to take the numbers that were basically agreed with the Commission. However, of course, with what's going on in our neighborhood, we are bracing for the potential refugee migrant flow to come to Croatia as well. It is none of our intention to build fences and build walls, but we do need to prepare ourselves. And this issue is a lot more complex. What we're seeing right now, and the Prime Minister of Luxembourg mentioned, we need to prepare local communities, we need to prepare the facilities for these people to be taken in a really decent and humane way. But we need to look at the problem more broadly, because the quota that we're talking right now, the number, the mathematical formula will not resolve the overall problem. And I have been pointing out that what we're doing right now is like using a fire extinguisher in a forest fire. We need to look at the overall problem of the root causes why these people are coming to Europe. And finally address, as the European Union, I agree, we need to preserve peace, stability, and what we have achieved in the European Union. But I want to be a lot more ambitious for the European Union than that. I think that the EU, in the context of common foreign and security policy, but also of developmental policy, and working together with the OSCE, with the United Nations, can do a lot more in eliminating the root causes of these people who are leaving North Africa and the Middle East.
Do you agree with Prime Minister Vučić, though, that every country is being rather selfish on this at the moment, and that's not helpful?
I don't think that the countries are being selfish. Yes, everybody is looking at their own national interests and their own capacities and capabilities, but I think that I've seen from all the EU members goodwill to resolve this problem. It's going to take a while, but you know what I also point to, let's not waste too much time at looking at the current numbers. Let's look at the millions of people in North Africa who can potentially try to cross into the European Union and see what we will do in the future. Let's not be unprepared for another crisis that could be of a much greater magnitude. This is what we need to be talking about.
I have to say, I just came from the New York Forum on Africa in Gabon yesterday, and there was a very strong view among the large number of people there that much more has to be done economically to keep the Africans in Africa. So that mood and that pressure has already begun from business and the politicians. President Pahor, can I come to you? What view are you taking here in Slovenia? After all, in many ways, you've managed to escape the immediate and dramatic impact of migration, but what's your view on the politics of this, given that actually we probably haven't seen anything yet compared to what is looming?
I do advocate a policy of quota. I think that it has been a mistake by the very last council in June, I think, in Brussels, that this system has not been suggested and then voted by consensus. I think that the rejection of this system at the moment is basically suggesting that there is no common policy on migration issue at the moment. I am not saying that this quota system would solve all the problems. I do share your view that we do need a strategic answer to this question. But for the very first step, this answer would be the right answer. saying no to this at the June session of the Council has been a wrong answer to this. And it does mean at the moment status quo. So I would advocate at the moment quota system. I would advocate on the other hand the common policy how to solve with United States, Russia, other big international forces, the crisis in Syria, Iraq, Libya. And I would appeal to the people to be patient and not to, not to see the current situation as a threat. I'm not saying that it is an opportunity. I'm saying that it is a reality, that it is a time, Europe, to show that it is a manageable problem. I think the quota system would be the very first and good answer to the
trouble is the politics of many countries is showing that it is not, many people are not being convinced by what's happening, and it's enhancing radicalism and extremism and the fringe parties.
Let me say one thing on Europe. I think that Europe is based on really huge ideas. For example, reconciliation. It is, the foundation of the European Union. There are moments in history of communities, as European Union is facing today, when it is extremely important how a very important issue will be addressed. Will this mean a moral sufficit or deficit for the community, for European Union? At the moment, we are not addressing this issue properly. I think there is enough time and space to make better and more consistent decisions, but we have to do it now. And I think, once again, that the quota system would be the very first step, and then we have to go on.
I'm going to come to Christian Fries and also Lamberto Zanier in a moment. One comment here from Ambassador Mourier. On migrants, we must agree in Europe what is a safe country of origin. That's the French ambassador in Slovenia. But let me ask you, going back to Luxembourg, there we've heard from the president here saying just how urgent this is and the kind of expectation there is from the European Union. It's in your hands until December the 31st.
If I could decide by myself, it would have been decided since a long time.
Can you decode that, please?
We are 28 around the table, believe, for President Tusk. It was a situation where I thought that elections sometimes make decisions difficult. Because if you want to please everyone and if you want to have 100% satisfaction, you don't take any decision. And the problem was we had the proposition of 60,000 people for a continent of 500 million people. And we were not able to agree on that figure. And if President Power says we need quotas, it's a shame that we are not able to take our responsibilities. We speak about those people. You speak about fences. I just heard today that they send trains with people together. Some countries say we just want to have Catholics. This, remember me, the worst part of our history on our continent.
You see, Mr. Tusk, just before I widen this a little bit, this is the kind of granularity of challenge, and particularly with the public. But you were talking about tenderness and patience for Europe. You were talking about we must be strong and smart. That's, if you like, in the medium to long term, but there are very pressing problems of credibility here. How do you overcome that?
First of all, we have the system of quotas, but not obligatory, but on the voluntary basis. And it's, of course, the solidarity without obligation, it's not as effective as we wish. But also thanks to personal engagement of our today partner, I mean Prime Minister Bettel, your job as a presidency is quite effective. I mean, when it comes to these quotas for resettlement, it's we have more offers than we planned. And when it comes to so-called relocation, it's okay. It's not enough, but we know why. because in fact, the mood among politicians and elites in Europe, very tolerant and very open when it comes to migrants, it's in very clear and tough opposition to mood among ordinary people, especially in the Central and Eastern Europe. This is why, and you know what I mean, because it was one of the most important arguments in our disputes, also in June. You know, Prime Minister, President, some of them told us, I have election. But what does that mean? That people, the majority of people in Europe, are very skeptical, even against, for example, obligatory quotas. This is, and I am absolutely sure that this is because for some of them this is quite new experience. I'm talking about massive migration. It's, sorry, but it's very easy. I experienced this fact, for example, at the European Parliament. It's very easy to show your solidarity when you have a speech, and to show that you are ready to sacrifice your national interests and that you are very open. I remember this speech of my colleague from one of the most important institutions in Europe, that we have to open not only our windows but also our doors for migrants. Okay, it sounds very attractive and very European, but in fact we have to challenge today not only with our feelings and our good emotions, but with very, dramatic reality. It means today about maybe more than 70 million displaced people in the world. For almost of them, Europe is the main destination. We are talking about quotas, 40,000 people. This is the problem for Europe? For sure not. Germany is ready to give the asylum for almost 1 million people. Yeah, it's not a problem. Even for Croatia, Slovenia, France, Poland, 40,000 people, we know it. In fact, what is the biggest problem is to establish new policy. It means also return policy, relocation, resettlement, containing policy also. In cooperation with African countries, Egypt, for me, it's absolutely, I am absolutely convinced that we have to establish a new relationship with Egypt today, with Turkey, also because of this problem, because we need well-organized partners. This is not a movie about wonderful ideas. This is very dramatic practice with something new, because for example, human trafficking and human smuggling today, this is something like mass murders. When this is maybe the first thing we have to cope with. I mean, the tough fight against smugglers and traffickers. And this is also the obligation on the national level, on the national administration.
Right. Let me broaden it a bit. We've been on this for 30 minutes. We're not going to resolve the migration issue, but we are trying to talk about confrontation and partnerships and the new order, getting a taste of the kind of dilemmas that all of you are facing, literally minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, as these crises develop, often in very unpredictable ways. We're also joined by two others, and I'd like to get some idea on the OSCE's experience, Secretary General Lamberto Zenia, because what you've been dealing with in Ukraine has in many ways reasserted the importance of the OSCE. But you're dealing with the worst crisis since the Second World War, along with this other migration crisis. What are you learning? After all, you've had a migration crisis in eastern Ukraine, people being forced to move, dispossessed, removed under force. What are you learning about the ability, what have you learned in the last 18 months about the ability to create partnerships? Or is there more confrontation in this new order, whether one likes it or not?
Well, there is indeed more, let me also do this. There is indeed more confrontation as we see. Geopolitics is back, as we can all witness. Decision-making becomes more difficult. Defending the rules that govern the relations within the international community is a much more difficult job today. There are different interpretations, but also we face new kinds of situations. We face hybrid conflicts. The tools that we have need to be adapted. And yes, I really feel that we, in looking at the security agenda we have in front of us, we need to work to build coalitions. We have strengths in the international community. We have a strong institutional setup. We have created a strong set of institutions, but we need to adjust them to address a situation that has evolved in an unpredictable manner. The issue of migration that has been so thoroughly discussed, I agree very much with those who say that yes, you need to deal with the surge that we see now with the large numbers and the issue of how to express solidarity and demonstrate solidarity towards the refugees and then dealing with the immigrants in general. But it is clear that something larger is happening. And we need to address the root causes of this. Somebody earlier was mentioning this has been the hottest year ever. Climate change is an issue, and it's an issue that increasingly will have impact on the movements of population. And from a European perspective, obviously Europe will remain an area where people will try to go to. So we need to look into the kind of larger challenge and address issues of development, address issues of climate change, address issue of maturity in the societies, education in countries from which the refugee flows start. But we need to assist them to also to deal with conflict. And because of the emergence of geopolitics, this is becoming much more complicated. What we see in Ukraine today is a very vivid example of the difficulties that we are facing with in terms of managing relations among the countries of our region. But those difficult relations have repercussions also in the way the international community deals with Syria, for instance, or other areas. It creates a more confrontational relationship, which becomes in turn an obstacle to conflict resolution.
What's your view, particularly after the last 20 months of what's been going on in Ukraine, of the capacity of institutions? Again, quoting back what Mr. Tusk had said 45 minutes ago about how Europe must be strong and smart, and the need for patience. Where do you see a fault line, a real tension between the realities on the ground in places like Ukraine and other places where OSCE is having to operate, and the ability of the political institutions to cooperate, to partner, and also to come up with any kind of meaningful initiative?
Well, on the European Union, I have to say that after a not very good start, when the European Union was saying we will address this issue of the Ukraine crisis, then the EU realized that it had difficulties in finding the political space to engage, and at that point it gave full support to the OSCE. And that was a good example of a positive interaction. Now we have an extremely strong support from the EU in terms of personnel, in terms of vehicles, in terms of budgetary support. But this also only works because of this comprehensive approach to security we have, or because the inclusive approach, because we have Ukraine on board, we have Russia on board, we have everybody else. So we managed, to the extent that we managed to engage with everybody, and we don't import the political agenda of only one of the sides, then we find a political space to be able to act. Of course, on the ground, and specifically in Ukraine, we have difficulties that are related to the problems that the sides have in coming to terms with the difficult processes of implementing the Minsk agreements. And we have seen this morning the demonstrations in Kiev. We still have problems in our own relations with the separatists. Today, one of our UAVs has been shot down for a change over separatist territory. So there is a lack of respect also for these people for the role of the international community. We had people that were kidnapped for extended periods. So it is also, for us, we are learning by the day or day by day how to deal with these situations.
But one partner or one vested interest where you're operating has no respect for you whatsoever.
Sorry, say again.
One of those you're having to deal with in Ukraine has no respect for you whatsoever.
Well, that's the problem we are facing. And some of the people on the ground, well, there is no participating state that identifies themselves, rightly or wrongly, with some of these movements, separatist movements. But of course, we need to deal with them to solve the situation. But we can only facilitate a process between Ukraine and the people on the ground in the separatist areas.
Let me broaden this again, because you've been very patient, Christian, sitting there, but you are involved in UN economic assessments for Europe. You're also representing the Secretary General, who personally has expressed being heartbroken at what he's seen on migration and the scale of what is happening in Europe. But can I ask you to move further down the track as we look at the ability to have partnerships, or whether there's going to be more confrontation? How are you seeing it from a UN position, stepping one step back, if you like, particularly where this might be going when it comes to the economic realities, not least because of the demographic challenge and the impact of that on many countries in Europe?
Well, I think in a year as this, the 70th anniversary, we should be reminded also where the UN came from. It came from the ruins of the Second World War and the biggest refugee crisis Europe has ever seen. And back then, politicians stood together and they created the strongest vision ever for international cooperation seen, and the international architecture we see today was established on the ruins of the Second World War. When we see the crisis today, and it's a multiple crisis, we see the conflicts, we see the economic crisis, and we see climate change. Again, what is needed is to politicians to step up against those challenges and get together. And on one hand, I get concerned when I see today also tendencies for countries to break ties, to strive to being more interdependent rather to shape new partnerships. And we see that all over the world, shaped by the crisis. It's a natural reaction. When countries face a crisis, they tend to retract, they tend to protect their citizens. And that is what we know went wrong before the Second World War. But on the other hand, I get optimistic when I see then the UN, because we see world leaders coming to the UN at a scale that we haven't seen for years. And with the Sustainable Development Goals now being approved, but will formally be adopted by world leaders when they hopefully soon come to New York, all of them, is a sign of optimism for me. An ambitious agenda. The Sustainable Development Goals is the most historic and the most ambitious agenda ever sent by mankind. We can be the first generation ever to eradicate poverty. And we know we are the last generation that can do something about climate change without it's going out of scale and out of reach. So we face a historic opportunity, and the Sustainable Development Goals and the ambition that they represent, it gives me some hope also for all the multiple crises we have discussed today, because it is for the first time an agenda that unites all three dimensions of sustainable development: the economic, we need economic development, the social protection, the environmental issues, and then for the first time ever brings in peace into a global set of goals and unanimous goals. And this is key because, as we have heard again and again here, of course, without economic development, we will never be able to secure peace, and the reverse. Without peace, we will never get economic development. This united agenda is there, right in front of us. It's the most historic ambition ever, and I hope and trust in every country in the world and in this region will step up to it, because that is, in the end, what is the solution to the migration crisis, to the troubles we see in the heart of Europe again with conflict.
Clearly, migration is a major problem, a critical problem, and what Lamberto Zegna is having to deal with in Ukraine is a critical, pressing problem, which is affecting many, many lives. But can I just ask for your reflection? Let's keep broadening it, because the Prime Minister mentioned it, climate change. What's your assessment at the moment of the potential now for partnership and a convergence leading up to COP21? Because there are many who say that actually something is changing big time there, not least because business is coming into it.
No, exactly. And I'm from Denmark. I was there COP15.
You've been through the pain.
It wasn't a big
But
success.
are you expecting COP21 to be like COP15?
Exactly, it was spectacular and was cold. But what we learned in Copenhagen was exactly that we needed to turn it around. And instead of talking about barriers and constraints and quotas, we needed to talk about the historic ambition of green growth, how we can actually turn it around and engage countries and companies and communities all over the world together to invest in tackling climate change bottom up. And that has happened since COP15, and that's why I'm ambitious towards Paris, because today companies all over the world see this as an opportunity, and investing in new energy sources, renewable energy sources, green growth it's creating jobs, it's creating opportunities and investments and innovation all over the world. It's fascinating to see how fast it is moving. I grew up next to a windmill. When I was a teenager, my father erected one of the first Danish windmills. Today, we see windmills that are more than 100 times the size of those. We see solar panels being able to compete with fossil fuels when it comes to energy production. What innovation and investments and private companies they have done since Copenhagen is absolutely amazing. And that leaves us hope towards Paris. And that is a global partnership. The Sustainable Energy for All initiative launched by the Secretary General was exactly to establish a partnership towards Paris to enable us to get a strong climate deal. And I believe that optimism is there still.
Let me broaden this out. I'm getting quite a lot of comments here, which bringing them together are really about the frustrations of the public. The public when it comes to seeing what the challenges are, but seeing the difficulty, probably not made much easier, or probably made more difficult because of social media, which is making so much of what you're witnessing in Ukraine very immediate, even often before the policymakers know what is going on. How much is the challenge of creating partnerships, credible partnerships, which are strong and smart and seen as strong and smart by the public, really being hastened by this almost disconnect in the digital environment between the reality of policymaking and the expectations of the public? Mr. President, I saw you nodding there.
Well, at the moment, I think international community is producing more problems than solutions. I think we are facing a lack of political leadership. But we have a chance to do some good things before it would be too late. Now it's time to do it. I think the anniversary in New York will be a good political moment to appeal for political dialogue, no matter differences are among us, to face the most important problems in the world, from Ukraine to migration crisis to Middle East and Africa and so on. I think we should take 5 topics, all political leaders that are capable to take the responsibility to lead and to make a strategy how to face it. Will not be probably excellent at the moment, but should be an initiative that would be very convincing for the public. You've mentioned before the lack of confidence to the politics at the moment. I think it's obvious that now it's time to show that we are capable to lead the world out of the problems to the solutions. Just to add what Donald said before, at the moment, as far as migration policy is concerned, we do not have one European policy. We have 28 national politics on this issue. I think this is a wrong approach. I think we should change it.
Let me get some comments from all of you, if you'd like to, please, on this, what you've just said about the problems of political leadership. We've got 4 politicians and a former Prime Minister sitting, so we've got 5 politicians on the panel. But this is both an indictment and a very realistic assessment of the challenges that are faced in building partnerships and the kind of alliances that are needed to resolve issues in a timely way. Madam President.
Thank you. I wanted to come in. First of all, we really need to seize on the opportunity of the post-2015 development goals, looking at that as a long-term solution for the problem of migrations and many other issues that we're talking about today. But on the partnerships, and you mentioned the digital media, it's both an opportunity and a challenge. We know that with the digital media, we can send any sort of information around the world at a speed of practically light within a click of the key on your keyboard. That is being used by a lot of non-state actors today who are disseminating their propaganda and who cause a lot of problems that in turn cause migrations to the European Union. But we also have an opportunity to use the digital media to go ahead with programming that fosters partnership between state and non-state actors and international institutions and organizations. We have to use the digital media to promote tolerance, to promote all the ideals and the solutions that we will be looking for in New York, in Paris, and elsewhere. And when we talk about partnerships, this isn't just partnerships between states, between nations. Certainly within the European Union, for me, it's first of all about equal partners. But partnership with the United Nations, with the OSCE, but also with the civil society, with the non-governmental organizations, even individuals, and fostering the idea of working together, that in today's international environment, it's not just about states any longer as actors in international relations, but that we have a much more complex environment that we have to address in that way. So, looking at the crisis and how we've worked together, and being actually very critical of our initial responses in Ukraine, I must say that today, with the speed of communications and the speed of globalization, we have to act a lot faster. When I believe that sometimes we're so afraid of creating confrontation that we are not ready to stand up for the values that we should stand up for. I think that was the problem initially in Ukraine, to stand up for the values of the state order of the 21st century and the postulates of international law. We should not be afraid of that. Of course, confrontation not being the answer, the right response. Engaging, involving, and partnering even with those whom we look at, whom we disagree on, dialogue and inclusion is always a lot better answer than exclusion and isolation.
Thank you. Prime Minister Bettel, and please remember that address in the top left-hand corner. I'm getting a lot of people just commenting about specifics on migration. We can't drill down into every single issue on the migration crisis. That would be impossible in a meeting like this or a conference session like this. So what we're talking about is the overarching challenges of partnerships, or will there be confrontation in this new world order? And those are the kind of things I want to get to, and we've got about 35 minutes to run. Prime Minister Bettel.
Just to say a few words, because President Grabar also just spoke about the development goals. The fact is, we can decide, 28 countries, to have some goals. And in New York, as long as I listened to President Obama's speech, but 2 days later I heard the Republicans saying, not with us in the Congress. But we know that he will need the support of the Congress also to get some bills through. I know that when we meet, and because the young people who will tell you we need to do something for environment will be the same who will tell you we need jobs in Europe too. And so we have to be able to show that ecology and economy are able to work together. Because nowadays we speak all the time in Europe about social dumping, we speak about fiscal dumping, but we have today an environment dumping also, where we have in the States or in Asia, industries leaving Europe to go to those countries because they know that the rules are not that strict that they are on our continent. So I fully agree that we have to have ambitious goals. But this has to be also goals for other parts of the world. Because if we get less competitive, because we just think that we in Europe need them, and the States and Asia don't go in that direction, this will be a tricky situation. So we have to why not? We have rules about everything. Why shouldn't we once have rules about ecological dumping? And if you don't respect those rules, that there would be some difficulties for if not respecting those international rules. Then you spoke about digital and information. Yes, it is amazing when we see nowadays what we can do with Facebook and all this thing and Twitter. But we should also know that young people without history yesterday left Europe to go to Syria because of Facebook. Because they were able to watch videos produced by the Islamic States trying to convince them, where they had nobody listening to them in their own country, in their own city, in their own family, where they left from one day to another. So we should ask ourselves also the limits, or maybe also to get education to the social medias too, instead of leaving some young people just letting themselves discovering everything. And then about Ukraine, it's a difficult situation. I think what is important is that we still have a common position in Europe, and you can feel that we have not the same history. And Luxembourg has not the same history than Donald in Poland. And we have to respect the history, the experiences you had with a neighbor. But what for me is the most important thing, it's for the moment I've got the feeling that we are in a lose-lose situation. It harms Europe, it harms Russia, and we are in a reaction-sanction policy. And we should be we know exactly that neither Poroshenko nor Putin wants to be the loser. So we need to have a situation where we know that both can go out of the situation by head up. And I'm very happy that today also in the Ukrainian parliament what happened is a tragedy. And I fully condemned all act of violence. But it was important also that the Ukrainian parliament voted a bill today to have more autonomy for the East part, because this was a part of the agreement. And we should really see, and I'm really happy that Angela and François went also for the Minsk agreement, and we won't have Minsk 5 and Minsk 4, 6, and 7, and 8. We need to stick on the conditions, but it is important to find a win-win situation, because for me, for the moment, we are still in a lose-lose situation. But you ask about leaderships, but we try to do all we can. But believe me, we cannot decide also if Europe is strong, if Europe has now ahead with Donald and on the Commission with Jean-Claude Juncker, we have other leaders also, and we need to agree also with them. And we need to have this platform where we can agree on this. But also to have international organization doesn't mean that you have always democratic countries sitting also there. When I go to the General Assembly in New York, I have some dictators sitting there. And they are sitting there and they are respected. So we should also consider sometimes about thinking about international relations, if it's always the best thing. We should have order, we should have rules, but we should also look what's happening in some countries.
Lamberto Zanier.
On Ukraine, I fully agree with Prime Minister Bettel. We need to get out of a logic that would be a lose-lose logic. For that, it seems to me what we need to do is to use all the tools that we have in the international community. In the OSCE, we should expand the dialogue also with Russia, to flesh out
Do they want to talk to you?
Issues.
Do they want to talk to you?
They want to talk, they want to discuss, they want to reform. Obviously, it's a problematic agenda because there is a suspicion that they want to change some of the rules of the game, and that's obviously something that most countries will oppose, in fact. But in my view, we need to have that discussion. We need to understand better why there is at this point this malaise in terms of the relations between Russia and the West, and what can be done to address some of the fundamentals of that relationship in this broad context and from a security perspective, of course. Then it's up to the individual partners to find what are the ingredients, if you want, of a process to rebuild the relations that will also mend somehow the Ukrainian problem. But the issue is larger, and since we are discussing partnerships, what I see developing, I'm investing increasingly time in relations with partner organizations, because we do build coalitions, we have joint action plans, we have revitalized Chapter 8, as we call it, of the UN Charter, the platform through which the UN works with the regional organizations, trying also to create more uniformity in the rules, if you want, worldwide. That certainly is a process. But one of the obstacles I'm finding from my perspective and my current role is to go beyond that, to look more into public-private partnerships, to engage with other sets of actors, because the issues that we face do affect societies in a broad manner. And governments still appear to want to retain a monopoly in a way, and rightly so, I suppose. But we need also to explore, and I think the Sustainable Energy for All example is a very good one. Building broader partnerships where governments will have their roles, but also other significant actors, international actors. We, for instance, struggle in engaging with international financial institutions because they have their own strategy, they have their own constituencies, and sometimes when we feel we need a broad strategy of international community to address an important problem, we struggle to do that because we see different agendas emerging. So there is a lot of work to be done, but it seems to me, given the complexity of the agenda that we are facing today, we really need to go an extra mile, to make an extra effort to create these coalitions and to engage more. We are doing that through the Security Days, the OSCE. We have invented new ways of engaging with different sets of actors, and that's what we want to invest more on in the future.
Prime Minister Vučić, let me come to you, because in the discussions before this session, one of the points you have made is about the power of collective will that has been shown, particularly in the Balkans. Here we are 20 years after the Dayton Agreement. From a small area, what are you learning about the possibility to have agreement when there's political will and a joint movement in the same direction among those who this time 25 years ago were at war?
Thank you, Nick, for asking me this question, because otherwise if you ask me something about climate changes or some big issues, I would just be very silent because I know nothing about it.
That's why I've asked you this one.
Yeah, thank you for that. Not a big leader, I'm just a local representative from the small country. Yeah, we felt only floods and drought this year, that's it, you know. But still know nothing about it except that. Well, I'll go back in a second and I'll relate myself to the words of the President Pahor. He was speaking about lack of leadership, and we all use the same words, always thinking of ourselves in the best way and thinking about all the others as non-leaders. And I have to say that I hope that European Union will be able to tackle more concrete issues. Not always all of us should participate in philosophical discussions. I'm not speaking about today because we were speaking in a very concrete terms. And I hope that European Union will be ready to face all the challenges in the Western Balkans. I'm not an expert on Ukrainian issue, and I don't know how that is going to be resolved. I'm not very optimistic on that. But I can tell you something. I can tell you that no big wars so far have started in Ukraine or in that part of the world. But many wars have started in the Western Balkan region, and very recently we have started with real economic reforms. We have some good results in the first and second years of these reforms, but the problem is that very fragile regional stability, and that's why we do invest a lot of our efforts, a lot of our endeavors into securing that region and into building more trust and confidence between all of us. And I hope that we'll be able within several years to build that kind of partnership. But at the same time, I'm a bit reluctant and I'm a bit more pessimistic on the future progress on that issue, because I see young generations, and that's why we, together with Albanians, founded that youth office, and we were guided by Franco-German example.
And what do you see in young generations?
What I see, it's not something that seems to be very optimistic to me, because I see in all the countries in the region that that young generation would like to show their muscles off once again. And you can feel it everywhere. I have 17 years old my son, and I can see that within his generation, because they don't remember our time, Milosevic time, Tito's time, all the other times. Well, and they say to me, you know, he came one day home and he said to me, well, Daddy, there are still 3-4 guys in my class that is for your party. And I said, all the others are Democrats? No, there are no single Democrats. We are all for those rightist parties. And when I was saying about those re-elections, you know what happened in my country? I got the news that Greek police just fired tear gas against those migrants. It happened in Macedonia. It's happening every single day in Hungary. We didn't do it a single time. But you know, there were some stupid guys in my country that wanted to organize big rallies against the migrants. And they were planning to have those rallies today. And our police said, no, we're going to ban all these rallies. And with those stupid actions, you're not going to bother us, and you are not going to torment those people. And you can say it is anti-democratic, and I think it is very democratic. It is very democratic to preserve your country very much away from those extremists, from those, you can call it fascists, whatever you want. We don't want to see them in a democratic society, because those people are just an ordinary people. Those people are not coming to the Balkans or to the Western Europe to kill us or to conquer us. They're coming because they're desperate, because they need to. I really mean it. And
but what does that tell you as a prime minister of a newly democratic country, which is moving towards hopefully joining the European Union, that your 17-year-old son is reflecting something which is really quite sinister in the next generation, as you've just identified it? We're seeing it in Bosnia-Herzegovina, particularly at the moment.
That's my biggest fear, but I'm not going to hear as Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I say that very openly before him. As you can see, that my biggest fear is everything that is related to Bosnia. Have more concerns over Bosnia than over a Serb-Albanian relationship. Whether you say it on Kosovo or Serbia-Albania, doesn't matter. I say something else. We need to take our destiny in our hands, and we don't need to flatter our own people. I don't care. I'm not going to flatter my people to say something against migrants. I had the most negative comments against my government and against myself after I visited those migrants. And I'm going to visit them day after tomorrow and next week once again, and I'm not going to stop on that. I don't care what people would say on that issue. I don't care what people would say and how people will react on every single issue in my country. I'm elected to do something for my people, and they can estimate it on another elections, and that's it. If I would ask them every single day, I would do nothing.
The ominous thing you're raising, Prime Minister, is the next generation, who are well connected, who are able to access so much information, but that's what you've put on the agenda about the difficulties of partnership.
We'll need EU support on that, because I don't know how to tackle that negative approach on everything, and it's related to that. It's related to that digital time or social medias, whatever you call it. But we always face 90% of negative approach, and Mr. Bettel is pretty right when he was saying, well, but some of those videos, some of those social networks brought guys to Syria to kill all those people, to kill that Croatian guy in Egypt, to kill several other guys in Syria and Iraq. And yes, that's what we'll need to face with. That's why we need to find the best reaction on that. But I don't know how to do it. We'll listen to you on that.
We've got 20 minutes to run, but let me just pick up, because President Pahor, you wanted to come in on that point, and also President Kitorovic, but particularly the issue of the next generation.
I think that Prime Minister Vučić knows that everybody in the international community supports his leadership. Has done a tremendous job on Kosovo, and everybody welcomes the last 4 agreements. I would like to add a small comment on as far as leadership and Western Balkans are considered. Now, at the moment, Slovenia and Croatia do disagree on one very important issue. Nevertheless,
you had a meeting about it yesterday.
Nevertheless, we decided yesterday with Madam President to go on with extremely important initiative, if Prime Minister Vučić would agree, on Brdo-Briuni process. So, okay, we are facing the problem, but nevertheless, because of this, we have to go on with a dialogue and with a vision how to settle it down. I think this is a good illustration how should be done when we are, as a politicians, facing the problems. Not to go back, but to go on with some sort of positive response to the crisis.
President Kitarovic.
Yes, actually, if I may, I wanted to respond to your original question to Prime Minister Vučić and perhaps offer 4 very specific, concrete steps.
Could you just raise the microphone a little bit? It's not...
I'm sorry,
yeah.
yes.
No, it's not your fault. It's...
Just very briefly, perhaps 4 lessons learned from what we experienced in Southeast Europe in the past, and offer it as a starting point for crisis in other parts. First of all, you have to improve dialogue and debate at all levels, political level and community levels, especially when you're dealing with inter-ethnic and inter-religious conflicts and post-conflict resolution. Secondly, you have to show capacity to change. That is very important in any conflict. Third, you have to develop trusting relationships, and I believe that what President Pahor mentioned is also crucial to continue with good and constructive relationships in Southeast Europe, that our problems aside, we're still capable of dealing with other specific issues. And fourth, and very important, and goes along what Prime Minister Vučić has said, counter negative stereotypes. Stereotypes that are sometimes results of history or diversions of history, twisting of history, or just the media today that tend to be sensationalist, but be very careful about stereotyping, and as politicians, as leaders, we need to do whatever we can in order to fight those stereotypes. I'd say that those 4 lessons learned from our own region hopefully will serve in other parts of the world as a model on at least how to proceed with the process.
Lamberto Zagno, are you seeing this in the regions you're operating in, the next generation becoming more entrenched in their views in that rather chilling way that's been described by Prime Minister Vučić?
One other area of engagement, we are setting up networks of young people, because we feel we need to engage with the next generation. Through these security days and through also networks that we are setting up, we try to reach out, and we're having difficult debates. We had recently an event focusing on countering violent extremism, where we were discussing the role of the new media. And of course, we do feel that developing these methods of communication is one way of enhancing the freedom of expression that we pride ourselves of. But of course, these freedoms are used by some negative forces, like the extremists, etc. They are used against us. So this is one of the big challenges. We want to also ensure that the attack that we have on some of our fundamental freedoms doesn't result in us limiting those freedoms. So we need to defend them, but we need also to discuss how we can best do that. And the young generations are a very active part in that discussion. So this is why coalitions need also to open up and explore new angles and touch on new constituencies. Working with women and young people, for instance, in countering violent extremism is certainly very, very important. And engaging with new external partners like the Arab countries, which we are doing also, even though we are a regional organization, we're reaching out more and more to the Arab world to discuss together with them some of the problems we have that are becoming common.
Prime Minister Patel, I'm going to come to you in one moment. Can I just ask, it's really warm in here, and I have a feeling that the warmth and the heat has probably seized up your keyboards on your tablets and your smartphones. Is there anyone burning to say something who would like to use a microphone? Because I'm not getting any messaging now, and the lights have gone up a little bit. The floor is yours. If there's anything else you want to put on the agenda about confrontational partnerships, new order, I don't see any hands going up. Use a piece of paper or something, but I'm open for the next. There is a microphone there, please, behind camera 4, I think it is, and I'll come to you in 1 minute. Right, Prime Minister Patel.
Yeah, just 1 minute. I just want to say a problem that we have nowadays, and President Grabar said it already, that we have a big responsibilities as politicians. A young generation now, and a lot of people think that everything is granted. Everything is normal. I studied in Greece. When I was in Thessaloniki, during the weekend, I went to Turkey, to Bulgaria, to Skopje, and the borders were closed. Closed. Because the borders officers were watching TV. I had to clean my car, to disinfect my car, and to pay a fee. This is something nowadays when I travel, nobody asks my idea. I can study somewhere else. I can to go to hospital. I can be defended. Everything is granted. We should not forget what we've done the last 20 and 30 years. And the problem is that when we are in Brussels, we take the decisions, and then when we go back in our parliaments and we get complaints, we say, yeah, Brussels decided. Brussels are not aliens. They are ourselves. So there is a huge responsibility also for politicians not to say that Brussels is responsible for something, because Brussels decides things that we decide also around the table. So what is important is always to remember, because during our European elections, everybody will tell you, oh, Europe, that's the size of the pizza, and how all cans should look like, or how the banana should be bent. But we should repeat every day what Europe brought us the last 40, 50 years, and that nothing is granted. And even peace is like a small flower. You have to take care of it, you have to put water on it, you have to take some sun, but not too much sun. It has to be very careful with something like that. And this is something we should, as politicians, responsibles, also know, instead of trying just to please to everyone.
I just need to clarify that Luxembourg is not pushing for a standardized pizza size. That's correct. In his presidency. I just want you to be clear on that.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. You're leaving the door open. Sorry, I'm not being facetious, but I just wanted to be clear. Thank you. Does anyone else want to come in as well? A little more light, please. Let's keep the light out. And could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Blaž Golop. I'm coming from Foresight Europe Network, and I'm based in Slovenia. So, a very interesting debate, and thank you, Chairman, for bringing these topics up. But I have two questions. First of all, for the former member of European Parliament, an MP, how difficult was to equip and to host refugees when we were not members of the EU, like Serbia is today, which demonstrated that safeguarding European values much more than many of European countries. So I have a question for current President of the Republic, because he was at that time member of the Parliament when the question in Slovenia was, and when we were not in a good economic situation, okay, we need to take care of these people now, immediately. So that's first, what was the experience. Second, finally we have Mr. Europe. As Henry Kissinger used to say, there is no Mr. Europe. Now we have it. Now we have it. And it was a long fight to get institutions, to get position, and finally we can call somebody. And we have Mr. Donald Tusk with us today, Mr. Europe, we can say. So now I have a question. Do you really think that there is only way forward to preserve the current state of the art, or there is a still vision go together with pragmatic politics? So which means, would this help you to solve daily problems if Europe would still have this energy? Thank you.
Right, quick answers, please. Who are you addressing those to?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking, I've got blank faces there.
First, the President of the Republic, who was in the position of dealing with the refugees when being in Slovenia.
Mr. President.
First and second for Mr. Europe. Thank you.
That is why I said before that we are much more able to help than we are saying we are at the moment. Back in 90s, We have had here 70,000 refugees. And the society has been proud how we dealt with the problem. I think now we are facing a similar challenge. I am not saying that we should open all the doors and all the windows. No, I think would be unresponsible to do so. But I think it is also unresponsible to close all the windows and all the doors. So I think, as I said, I would invite the Council, I would invite also the government of Republic of Slovenia to endorse the quota system if this would be on the agenda of October meeting in Brussels. I think that would be a fair step for the country and for the refugees.
Be for all the situations. I don't want that we discuss about quotas after all situations. It has to be a rule, and this rule has to be for the future also. This is important, because some people want quota for now. That's terrible. If we have quotas, it will be for, at least for, inshallah.
Do you want to come in, Mr. Tusk? Or shall I leave you to wind up in a moment? Okay, let me just, we've got 5 minutes left. I'm just going to throw something at you, which is about what happens somewhere down the track within 5 or 10 years. We're looking at cooperation, partnership, not confrontation. That actually there's a very positive side to migration potentially. Europe needs migrants. That's very clearly set out by a number of economic studies now, and the German government has said very clearly that's what we need because of skill shortages and so on. Are we perhaps on a cusp here where it requires a significant level of political cooperation rather than national selfishness, as you put it, Mr. Prime Minister, to address a very significant economic problem here for Europe, which requires new skills, because many of these migrants have those new skills? Now, we've got 5 minutes to just give views on that, but are we moving in that direction, even though no one really wants to talk about it, apart from Germany? Christian, what do you think? As you're not voted into power.
No, I do see it. I see it in my home country. Actually, as a reaction to all the refugee discussions we've had, there's been a big campaign in Denmark with the title, "I was once a refugee." And the people standing up there, presenting themselves, some of the best doctors we have, innovators, company leaders, scientists, standing up and saying, "I was once a refugee." And that is also what is hopefully can help us to change the atmosphere in the European context. And some of the negative waves that we do see coming of protection, of closing, of borders, of fences, because we have to counter it.
Do you think that could be sold politically as a positive rather than the current myopia and claustrophobia there is about the issue?
I think it needs, as we heard from the Prime Minister, it needs brave politicians to stand up and defend it and say it. Because that is what in the end is, there was also a survey done, you know, what is the, often you have this sense that politicians, they listen to the population and do what the population is saying, and the voters, often it's the opposite. Voters increasingly listen to politicians standing up, defending basic human rights and principles, and standing up for the migrants and for the refugees, and defending them.
Prime Minister Bettel, 4 months to go on your presidency. Could you see that there being a significant shift on this issue on migration? I mean, The Economist at the moment, it is, for example, it has one of its leaders this week, let them in and let them earn. In other words, the positives of all of this.
I said it at the beginning. You asked me at the beginning to say something about immigration. I told you it's also a chance for Europe. The fact is, what would be terrible now if you say that it's a chance that you pick your refugees. You say, I want refugees from 25 to, or from 40 to 45 with at least that diploma, with that religion. That would be terrible, because you do shopping in the refugees. And I think they left the country because of a tragic situation. So what is important is to know that some of them has the capacity to work directly, some of them has it not, but we have maybe the capacity to teach them also to be able to learn something what they were not able to learn in their own countries. Because believe me, in their own countries maybe, they will also need people to rebuild the country soon. And so it's also an opportunity for us to give back something we got also in our history.
Donald, just finally, the last remark, because we have to close in a moment. Just picking up on this point, can you see a significant challenge now for politicians on this issue? In other words, selling the positives of migration. Migration has always been a positive in many ways in many countries. History shows that. But at the moment, it's difficult to sell here in Europe.
First of all, I can't accept my new title, Mr. Europe, yeah? Because Europe is a woman, not a man, and I'm just an official in Europe.
That's why I looked at you as if to say, is it you?
Thank you. And, but it's not only a joke, you know. I think that we discussed about leadership and leaders in Europe, and as you mentioned, about the lack of political leadership in Europe. This is I'm really convinced, not only as a politician and today the President of the European Council, but also as an historian, that in our history we have more problems with strong leadership than advantages. And of course I can understand the sentiment for this time with strong leadership. In my country, in other countries in Europe, here in Balkans, Tito, Zhivkov, Ceausescu, it was a really strong leadership, for sure. Very simple. Everybody knows where is his place and what is the main rule. But in fact, today Europe, is not about strong leadership. It is a very boring and complex story about rights, laws, procedures, negotiations, compromises, but this is the best guarantee of our freedom and, in fact, in the end of the day, of our effectiveness. I have no doubt. It's not spectacular. I know that, and from time to time, I feel also this desire, you know, to, like in the old Greek myth about Gordian knot and Alexander the Great. You know, it's spectacular to use the sword. Yeah, but believe me, Europe is the best place in the world because we decided just after the Second World War that we prefer freedom, procedures, laws, not strong leadership, confrontation, aggressive ambitions. And this is why I am optimistic, but I am not naive. I think that our main topic today, partnership, challenge, you know, historically and logically, politics is about conflict, not about partnership. Partnership is our never-ending dream. And, but in fact, our political reality, conflicts, and our ability to solve not all of them, but to limit, to solve some conflicts. And of course, I think that Europe is quite efficient in this case. Not enough, for sure. But, for example, Ukraine, sorry, but I have to say one word about Ukraine. Is Europe strong enough vis-à-vis Russia when it comes to Ukraine crisis? For sure not. But it's smart enough. For me, also, including your mission, there's a Minsk agreement, the process of Minsk implementation, this engagement of Normandy format. This is the best sign how smart we can be. Even we know that we are not strong enough to dictate, you know, the final solution. But for sure, this is much better way than war, or to give up. Yeah. Maybe this is today the only way we can use. And for sure, the European politics will be not as spectacular, especially as young people want. I can understand why. I'm also quite young, you know. I'm 58, you know, and I need also some spectacles In fact, I may be the first victim of this boring procedures today in Brussels. But truly speaking, I really prefer this boring life in Europe than very interesting and spectacular life in other part of our world. You know, and the last sentence, in Brussels I have a very nice small shop, and the sailor, he's coming from Pakistan, but he has been for many years in Brussels. One day, it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, he told me, "You are from Russia or from Czech Republic," because of my pronunciation. And I told him, "No, I am from Poland." And he didn't recognize me. And he told me, "You know, what a shame, because in fact I am you know, Putin. This is my icon. I love this person. He's so strong. So this is the best politician in the world." And it was for me a little surprising. You know, maybe it's a good destination for you. Maybe you want to live there if you need some. And he was really surprised. I mean, "Are you crazy? You have no idea what politics means, you know." It was his answer, you know. Of course, Brussels is much better to live. For me, this is the best and the shortest review of our problems today.
Donald Tusk, President. Donald Tusk, President of the European Council, thank you very much indeed. We could stay on and listen to more stories from you, I think. But unfortunately, we have to end. To both presidents, both prime ministers, executive secretary, and also secretary general, thank you very much indeed. Just before you, thank you for putting up with the heat as well. I'm not sure if it's warmer in here or warmer out on the lake. Can I tell you what's coming up next? So stick around for this session. The ending of sexual violence in conflict. And the Right Honourable Baroness Annalay, Minister of State at the Foreign Office in London, will be hosting remarks on that shortly in this room. But thank you to our panellists.